So Yuri and I recently tried out the new format for the test. We thought, why not give it a shot? So we did, and Yuri aced it, just like she always does with the old format. And this time she got full marks again. It's amazing.
Thank you. At, at first, we were a bit nervous because the content seemed different. We were curious about what it would be like, especially with the new open-ended questions at the end, part F. In the past, those questions weren't graded, but this time they were. So we had to give proper answers, not just whatever came to mind. And honestly, I wasn't too concerned before because I thought it wouldn't be graded anyway. But this time it was a different story.
Yeah, overall, there were three major parts, and they've changed quite a bit. It was nerve-wracking. But my initial impression was like, interesting. The audio quality was definitely better this time. In the
Mhm.
past, it was often hard to listen due to poor quality, but this time it was clearer, especially with the addition of British and Australian accents.
Yeah, it felt like a lot of English accents had been added, so I had to put in extra effort this time, especially with the British pronunciation. Understanding the situations in the conversation was challenging at first because I'm more used to the American accent. The conversations tended to be ambiguous, which made it a bit tricky to follow along. But somehow I managed to focus on the main points.
By the way, the scoring has changed from four scoring categories to three. I think the new categories are speaking and listening and manner of speaking. So overall, the total score is 90. So even if each category isn't perfect, you can still get a perfect score overall. So it's very impressive how Yuri manages to ace it every time.
Mm. Yeah, it's like personally, I feel like I have a good chemistry with Versant, and I think it's probably one of my favorite genres. But with other tests, it's not like it goes this smoothly.
I see. So from the perspective of someone who aced all the sections, how was it this time around? I mean, there were some changes in the format or the questions, right? Like there weren't these listening focused questions before, so that was a bit new. But
Mm.
in terms of difficulty overall, how did you find it?
Yeah. And those first two parts, part A and B, they were pretty much the same kind of questions as last time, right? So I was kind of used to them.
Yeah, that part was, yeah, pretty much the same. Well, if there was any difference, it was maybe just that there were a few more words, or it felt like there were more words. But yeah, it wasn't like a huge difference.
So I guess I'm quite good at ear copying kind of stuff. So like, yeah, mimicking sounds, just like some kids are just naturally good at stuff like this, kind of copying, mimicking too, right?
Right. So your approach to repeating, I had this real eye opener this time.
Oh, really? Hmm. It was like fast off, I was trying to catch the pitch and yeah, I was trying to catch a pitch when I'm about to repeat.
Yeah, it's like, wow, it's almost like thinking like a native speaker.
Oh, I mean, um, yeah, it kind of feels like trying to recreate a melodic line from a song. It's like, yeah, when it's about getting the melody down, like reproducing it, and then at the same time in your head, it's like the other part is trying to type the words, you know?
Yeah, I totally get that. So it's like you are getting the melody down and constructing a sentence at the same time. And when you mesh them together nicely, you can repeat stuff perfectly.
So on the flip side, if the original pronunciation is like not that clear or anything, it's a bit harder to do that. That's just my personal take on it.
Yeah, definitely. With different accents and everything, it can get quite tricky.
Yeah, that's why, like I said before, there's not just American accents, but British and Australian ones too. So for someone like me who is not used to them, it can be a bit challenging, you know?
Yeah, it is. But anyway, speaking of repeating, the way it's approached isn't too different from last time, I think.
Yeah, the approach to it is it's not drastically different from last time. So the toughest part, I would say, is the new part where they add those conversations, part C and D. Part C is listening to conversations and answering questions about them, and part D is like passages, right?
Yes, it's kind of like part four in the listening section of TOEIC.
Yeah. So those conversations are still understandable, and you can usually get a sense of what's going on. You can kind of guess whether it's a good conversation or a bad conversation. And the questions for the conversation part C, there's only one question for each. So it's not like tricky or anything. It's like they're really straightforward questions that you'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, it's like you're not trying to focus on the tiny details. You're just kind of passively observing the big picture, right?
Mhm.
So, but even with that, you can still answer lots of the questions, you know?
Mhm, mhm. So even when I got a perfect score, there were still some questions I couldn't answer perfectly. I don't know, maybe I just guessed right or something, but it's got this formal name like speaking and listening. But honestly, for me, it was more about struggling with the listening part rather than speaking.
Yeah, I felt exactly the same. But this new listening section they added this time, the answers are like free form. So it's like nothing we've had before. You have to give your opinion and you have to speak everything yourself.
Mhm, mhm. So, for example, the passages we had this time, some parts were hard to catch pronunciation wise, but content wise, it's like they were really everyday stuff like imagine a garden with fruits and stuff, something like that. So it's like super ordinary. It's like something you'd find it in a children's picture book. And there were a lot of those kinds of passages. So I think content-wise, TOEIC might be tougher. It's like it's not that business topics weren't there at all in Versant, but it felt more like regular conversations. I don't think it was terribly difficult in that sense. But in general, I think the real challenge lies in being able to do it spontaneously. So, like, even if the words are simple, being able to do it on the spot is really tough.
Exactly. It's like even if you don't complete a sentence, just arranging words or phrases can sometimes get you points. I
Mhm.
felt like there were quite a few instances where that happened, especially in listening. There were also passages in retelling that were just too long, right? Even though the response time was about 30 seconds, I feel
Mhm.
like there was just too much to cover in that time. Sometimes when you're not finished by the end, it's like, oh dear, I'm out of time, you know? And even with the last open questions, sometimes the questions are so simple that you end up with extra time. But sometimes it's like, wow, there's not enough time for this.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, sometimes you realize you're making grammar mistakes as you're constructing sentences, and you end up correcting yourself multiple times, right? But I felt like I did that really well. So even though I was correcting myself a lot, I didn't feel like it was a negative thing. It's like even though you're correcting yourself a lot, the fact that you're still getting evaluated means there's value in trying.
Yeah, definitely. Like everyone feels encouraged to try.
Yes, yes. I mean, Japanese exams often have a restrictive format, so I don't think I'm very suited to that kind of thing. But I feel like with Versant test, the more effort you put in, the more recognition you get. So yeah, even if the odds seem slim, it's like just give it a shot, you know?
Yeah, having that kind of attitude is very good. It's important. Even in real English conversations, even if you make mistakes, just keep talking, keep trying. But really, even though you scored full marks in the previous format, being able to do it in the new format as well, that's really impressive.
Mm, so there's chemistry between us, me and Vas, and I mean the level of vocabulary I use might be at like a 10-year-old kid. Yeah, maybe I only use vocabulary at that level.
Yeah, I also used simple vocabulary, but I think it's really rare to have full marks with both formats, like Yuri. So I hope everyone finds our videos helpful.
Yes, I hope so too.